Great friend of mine, known him through high school, known him as a big time wrestling athlete. And he went on heading to Sacramento and joining with Uriah Faber's gym. He's an up and coming MMA fighter, A1 Combat. I am so excited to bring him on. Glad he could take the time. And I was absolutely pumped and stoked when he ended up winning his last fight on decision. So joining us here on the show, my good friend, John Buttner. No, it's not every day that you basically get a chance to, interview an up and coming UFC fighter or UFC fighters for that matter. But it's always such a great quality content kind of thing that you have here on this show. And so, I gotta say, man, I was absolutely stoked at your previous fight with the decision victory. Take me through to that, man. Recapping it. I mean, what was kind of the things you went through in that fight for 3 rounds, man? And what were some of the takeaways that you got out of it from your opponent?
Big takeaway for me was just a lot of good experience coming off a layoff. I got to fight him in his hometown, and I got the full 15 minutes in there, and that's experience that you just can't really replicate in the training room and such. So being able to go out there, feel all 3 rounds. That's the first time I've been able to do that in my professional career. And the big thing for me going into that was just feeling more composed in the moment and not being in a rush. And I felt that I was able to do that in there. And overall, I think I gave a good performance for coming off of a big layoff. So.
Yeah, so and I will tell you because I mean, like I said, knowing from the tenure that you had, as former high school teammates in football, and then seeing you in wrestling and all that, I knew that like I told a bunch of guys, I'm like, look, you need to keep an eye on this kid as far as a grappler and somebody that really does strike when the moment is right, and he's gonna find any and every way to finish it off. And that I thought that was the perfect thing. I thought it was a great toe-to-toe fight, and especially with the way that you kind of came up in a couple angles. I mean, like I said, and from a fighter's perspective, when you start to look at your opponent, I mean, there's got to be a bunch of things because again, every opponent has a different strike ability, right? So they have a different focus, they have a different approach. What's kind of the thing when you face off against an opponent? Are there a few things you kind of analyze? Do you do that before fights, or are there some things you analyze even during those and just do quick short breaks to kind of help you to get the edge?
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to think of myself as an analytical mind in MMA, and I really enjoy studying the sport. And the way I see it is it's a lot of like rock, paper, scissors. There's a lot of different styles, and just kind of being able to find the path of least resistance. And the more of a well-rounded MMA fighter you are, you're able to do that. So, I do my tape, and I kind of create a game plan and things like that. But something that I did different this camp was just trying to focus more on what I was going to do rather than what they were going to do. Once I got a general gist of how they like to fight and where their strengths are, weaknesses, things like that, it's like, okay, I've got that in the back of my head going into camp. And then I kind of like to refresh on it towards the end too, just to tune up some things specifically. But yeah, I think it's important to be able to be familiar with your opponent and kind of be able to spot, their tendencies and things like that to really, go into the fight as prepared as possible.
Absolutely. And you never want to be caught with your pants down, right? I mean, a lot of these fighters, even in boxing, you want to be the best like shape of your life, and you want to be in the best clear mind, especially when you're going into that ring, because by the time you're in, oh, it's go time. It's ready to go for 3 or 5 rounds, into a fight like this. So coming from a very strong family background, they invested so much for you to being in the position that you are in now. And I'm so happy of the fact that, for one thing, for families to be very invested in what they've got. It's the most important thing. It's a very loving thing. And so for you, when you first got into, your first gym, take me back to that experience for you, man. I mean, this was something that like once you saw it, you're like, man, I want to be the absolute best that I can be. What was that experience for you in your first time?
Well, I think around 12 or 13 years old, MMA started catching my eye on TV, and it's something that I wanted to do, but my parents were very hesitant on getting me into because I was, uh, a bit of a problem child as far as like fights in school goes and things like that. But finally, they decided to let me give it a shot, and went in, and I was hooked right from the get go. It's just I've always been an athlete, and like to really challenge myself. And I think that's something that I found out in high school is I really enjoyed one-on-one competition through wrestling. And so then being able to, feel that in MMA as well, I don't know, it just felt right. And, it was something that I just immediately was, like I said, I was hooked on it. I started taking the public bus to the gym every day, 2 times a day that summer. And yeah, and just became my overall passion in life, and something that I want to get the most out of in my youth.
So, as an experience being in MMA, and of course with different divisions, you're in the featherweight, and you're in the class where the expectation, and correct me if I'm wrong for this, but the expectation when seeing from guys from bantamweight and featherweight, these guys are cut, these guys are lean. But I think in the case in your instance, because you've had wrestling background, grappling such an important thing, especially if you're going for the submission strike, and you still bring in a balanced amount of power and strike ability to where you wear guys out, and to the point where now I got him right there in the corner. It's either submission or he's just going to be tired out to where he's not going to strike. He's giving me everything he's got, but he's got nothing left in the tank. So in the featherweight division, I mean, to kind of, from your experiences, what's the expectation in that division? Are there kind of some things you can kind of break down what it is to basically fight in this division?
Well, I think it's a very dynamic division. I think 45 and 55 naturally bring a lot of people into it. It's very saturated. That's like, pretty much your average size in people. And it's got a good mix of the conditioning, the speed, the strength, everything like that. So they're always very fun divisions and packed with a lot of talent. And mainly for me, like I just try to make sure I can get the absolute most out of my frame, my conditioning, making sure the diet's on point and things like that. I like to bring my size and reach down to that division. And I think I'm very capable of fighting at 155 too, and that might be something that I do in the future. But to be honest, making 45 feels really easy for me. As long as I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, like it's very doable. And yeah, I think it's important to just get the most out of your frame, and just be as optimal as possible when stepping into the cage. And I feel like at 145, I'm able to do that.
Absolutely. And I always am curious about this because when I watch professional athletes, man, and like, especially even for fighters, when they got to go into cut mode or they got to basically get up and wait to be a part of that class, right? What's been your dietary plan? I've always been so curious of it. And for our audience here, because I mean, that's got to be a lot, man. And there's some of them I've talked to that like, their dietary plans go from like, oh, it's pretty, thorough. It's pretty straightforward. And some of them, it's just strict as hell. So I'm really curious of it. Do you have a dietary plan for our audiences here that can get some experience behind it? And maybe they might make a change even in 2024, like what's that like for you and what's your plan?
For me personally, the way I go about it is to give like the rough 101 on like how I like to shape my diet. It's as far as proteins go, I eat a lot of eggs, chicken, fish, steak, grass fed, whole foods, organic, things like that. For fruits, I like cherries, blueberries, mangoes, dates. And for my carbs, I usually stick with sweet potatoes and rice. And I have to train anywhere from like 2 to 4, sometimes 5 times a day, depending. So a big thing for me is just really being able to recover from workout to workout and be able to get the most out of each individual workout. So a lot of that is revolved around being able to replenish the glycogen in my body. So that's a lot of simple carbs. And then I like to have my heavier meals later in the night after I'm done with all my, my training and things like that. And that's kind of how I go about it. I count my calories. Everything is precise. That way I make sure that, math is math. And that's just how I feel about, as far as losing body fat. You know, numbers are numbers, and yeah, so I just follow that, and as long as I do it, it comes off nice and easy.
There you go, folks. Dietary 101 from there. I got to tell you, man, I mean, I was very happy and excited when I got to 205 myself. And my wife and I were trying to meet, our summer bod goals, right? So I'm having to try to, stay lean, maintain, and try to build more of that leaner muscle, but at the same time, trying to cut down the body fat. So that's really, really good stuff. That's something I'd look into. And yeah, with dietaries from Monday to Friday, in a whole week schedule, I mean, it's such a good, like, it's disciplining your mind. That's the biggest thing. And so it's great. It's great getting that experience. And even for our audiences, man, something to think about, for especially when you still got the time of 2024. So with you training in Uriah Faber's gym, and somebody I widely respect, Uriah Faber, great fighter. Many colleagues of mine have been big fans of him. Um, when you started, discovering, MMA, was there ever somebody you kind of idolized that you looked at and said, you know what? I love his style. I love his professionalism, but I like the way he kind of carries himself. Was there ever somebody you idolized in the MMA that you say, you know what? I could shape my fighting style and ability almost similar to his. Was there ever someone that you had in mind?
For sure. For me, that was George St. Pierre. He was my all-time favorite fighter growing up,
Mm.
and I feel like he really embodied what a martial artist is and should be. He was a professional in the cage, outside of the cage, very well-rounded, smart fighter, and really built a team around him that was able to give him good game plans going into the fights and prepare the absolute best way possible. And yeah, I just kind of try to live like a martial artist, not just go in there and fight for 15 minutes and then take this big old hiatus from the room. I like to get right back in there as soon as possible, and just lived a very disciplined life. And yeah, when I think of the word discipline, I think of GSP. So
Mhm.
he was my idol growing up, and it's someone that I try to really emulate through my training and just how I carry myself as a fighter.
Man, I absolutely loved watching GSP, man. I mean, good God. I mean, that guy probably had the most muscular thighs that I was almost afraid to even have like a leg wrestle with, like, I mean, the guy was so built, but he was so fun to watch because yes, I think it was a great guy to really kind of, keeping an eye on because he was great at grappling. He was also very strategic as he started to move around because he wanted to be in the best spot where I got you locked in, you're screwed. And I mean, he was the best of all of them. And um, so one last thing before letting you go. Um, I mean, in the MMA world, because not a lot of people really do kind of know about it, but in your experiences and especially taking on this journey road, because like I said, I've told you from the last time that we talked, I'm pulling for you for getting into that big UFC card, and we are getting geared almost for UFC 300, man. It's going to be so stacked. But being in that journey, I mean, what were some of the benefits and maybe what are some of the sacrifices that you had to take? Because it's a hell of a life, man, being an MMA fighter. So, what was kind of the experience behind it?
Oh well, you know, it's hell, but you know, embracing that and then learning to love that. But it's man, it's I think it's just as hard mentally as it is physically. It takes a lot out of you, and especially in the early on stages of your career, you don't make that much money or anything like that, and you really have to sacrifice a lot. There's guys training to do this all around the world. Coming from third world countries and such that this is like they'll move to here wherever to you know fulfill their dreams and you see a lot of different work ethics in that room, and it really keeps you honest about how much you're putting into the sport. So I think that's another great thing about training out here is just the wide variety of styles you get, and the people from all different walks of life, and it really gives you an honest look at what it takes. And yeah, if you're not putting in the work that you're supposed to, it will be exposed in the cage.
Man, there you go. I mean, life of an MMA fighter, man. It's a lot of hell, but hey, you make it successfully, and you grind and you train hard every single day, and you're gonna make it there. I mean, like I said, my favorite fighter that I've had for years that I loved watching was John Jones. I've said it all the time. I thought he was the greatest, in respect, greatest washed fighter because I loved him as a fighter. I thought he was just fantastic. That night that he almost got robbed in his championship belt night, took care of the robber that tried to mug him, and then goes into his title fight and wins that fight. I was like, I got respect for this dude. Like the fact to go in there and yet have a clear mind knowing this guy wasn't worth my time. My time is in that ring. And the second he won the title fight, it was bittersweet from the end of it. But it is a hell of a life, but you grind and you train hard and you fight hard. Many opportunities and many blessings are there ahead, man. And so I give you props for that, but appreciate you coming up onto the show. What's the deal, man? What could possibly happen, sometime soon? Is the next fight, and do you have a selection of an opponent, or are you just kind of waiting it out and seeing what kind of happens?
Well, I've got a big announcement coming up soon here that I'm going to be posting about. And then after that, I'm looking to fight hopefully in June, July, just get everything squared away. And yeah, like I said, after my fight, I just want to have an active year and keep the ball rolling. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to being back in the cage and doing what I love.
Well, there you go. And you know that everybody, and even in my new location up in Denver, we're all pulling for you, man, especially Foothill alumni, man. We're all pulling for you. Absolutely excited for your next bout and next fight. And congratulations in winning in division in your last fight, man. Absolutely proud and cannot wait for the next one ahead. A fun question, I will say, because we're getting geared for UFC 300. Is there anybody in mind that you're hoping you might see fight that is like, that's the fight for the ages? Is there anybody you thought of in mind?
Well, I don't have that fight card right in front of me, but if I'm correct, I think that Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje fights on that card.
Oh man, I that's going to be a fun one right there. Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've got my eyes on. Those guys always bring it, and I think that it's going to be damn near impossible for them to have a boring fight. So, and for both guys, it's a legacy fight. The stakes are high, and yeah, man, that's one I'm really looking forward to.
I will say the first time I ever became a UFC fan, the first ever fight I watched was UFC 100, and I thought my favorite fight of all was GSP's. I mean, the guy against Jose Aldo. I mean, my God, man, Thiago. I mean, it was great. It was a great night, and BJ Penn. I mean, it was a stacked card. I couldn't stand, the Brock Lesnar fight, but still, it was something. But hopefully UFC 300. I mean, like you said, and both of us from Vegas, it's never going to be a dull night. You know what you're going to get at T-Mobile Arena. So my hope is it goes there. It's going to be a wild and packed night from there. But appreciate you coming on, man. Rest up well, and we will definitely see you on your next fight coming up soon, man. Take care of yourself.
For sure, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey there, everyone. Thanks for watching. Make sure that you guys like, follow, and subscribe to get the latest from the show. Also, go check out a few of our coolest segments that we've had from previous shows. And also make sure that you stay up to date on the show on all platforms, wherever you guys find your podcasts.